It's always easier to criticize than to make constructive suggestions. But let me say, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. I want to congratulate the Center for European Reform, Charles, Simon, Philip. You've done an incredible job, I have to say. And as someone who spent the last 7 years working on the Lisbon agenda, I really have to congratulate you on your diligence, on your commitment to this agenda. Your report has made a tangible difference in the Lisbon process, so congratulations to you. Now, I'll divide my remarks today into two parts. First, I'll talk a little bit about Europe 2020, perhaps some of the differences to the Lisbon agenda. Secondly, I'll also focus a little bit on what's perhaps missing or what could be improved. Now, overall, I have to say, in my opinion at least, there is a qualitative difference between the Lisbon agenda and Europe 2020. And I say that because there are now actual policy processes that underpin these goals that we are trying to reach. And these are, of course, the 7 flagship programs. And this is different. In the past, we just set these goals, but there were really no policy processes to follow that could actually get us there. I also agreed with President Barroso that there is a much greater sense of urgency than I've ever seen. And I say this when I'm interviewed. 2010 is not the year 2000. This is very, very different. And it's a sense of urgency, as I said, across the board from all stakeholders, from all the member states, that is really unprecedented. Also, the Council is more engaged than it previously was. I really believe that President Van Rompuy can play an important role, a very constructive role. And even if Germany and France are not really on board, I understand that that's a huge problem. But what's new? I mean, that was also the case before. And I do think that having strong leadership from President Van Rompuy and perhaps having 25 other countries on board should not be underestimated. So I have high hopes there. I also have to say it is a more comprehensive plan than anything that the Lisbon agenda ever was. The fact that public finances now feature in this strategy is new, is very important. Also education, resource productivity, the internal market, it really is something that is much more comprehensive. Whereas previously the Lisbon agenda was so often reduced to just these 2 targets, the 70% employment rate and the 3% R&D goals. So a much more comprehensive strategy. I also like that with regards to indicators, that we don't have this one-size-fits-all approach that we had previously, meaning that we have European targets, but country-specific targets as well. And this was done for the first time with regards to the environmental goals, the 2020 targets, and it's now also going to be applied to the 40% tertiary level education rate. It's going to be applied to the 3% R&D target, and this is very necessary because in the past with the Lisbon agenda, I mean, how motivated was a country like Sweden going to be with 3% R&D spending when they already spent more than 4%? And if you went to a country like Malta or Bulgaria, you know, they could never even think about reaching the 3% target. So I think European targets and country-specific targets makes a lot of sense. Also, greater surveillance. President Barroso said it. The use of policy warnings. It's not really clear to me what that means, but the fact that we can deploy it, I think, is very important. The document, the Europe 2020 document, also seems to suggest a willingness to return to naming and shaming, which I think is very positive because it's something that stimulates the process, makes it more interesting, gives the media something to write about. So it's something that I would personally very much welcome. I also note that the process itself strikes me, it has really opened up. One of the things that President Barroso didn't mention is that there was a stakeholder consultation and that actually 1,500 stakeholders contributed to this consultation and with much enthusiasm. So I think this is not to be underestimated. There is a deliberate process of opening up, bringing in additional voices. Now, that being said, let me spend a moment on just what could be improved or areas that perhaps lack in clarity. I was personally a little bit distraught when I saw the 3% R&D goal crop up again, because it's so clearly an input indicator, and it's very dangerous to equate R&D spending with innovation. However, what I'm sensing is that there is a realization in the European institutions that this is just for lack of a better indicator. So, I mean, the way it was explained to me is that if we did not have the 3% R&D target, we would have no innovation indicator. So, I mean, it's better than nothing, probably, but it's still not enough. And I'm sure that most of you know that Commissioner Gagan-Quinn, we now have our first innovation commissioner, and she's a wonderful lady, very dynamic, and I have very high hopes. She's going to put together an expert panel to work on an innovation indicator. So for the time being, we're going to have to do with the 3% target, but I really believe that as we go on, we need a much better, more output-oriented innovation target that actually measures performance. Also, I believe that the public sector is not nearly enough highlighted in the document as it needs to be. The public sector accounts in most European countries for 40 to 50% of the economy. So it's a sizable chunk that you can't just leave out. It covers important areas such as health, elder care, education, transport, areas where we know that in future years we are going to have much greater demand, be it only due to our demographic developments. So the public sector for me is sort of the next stage in the European reform process. In the previous decade, the focus was very much on restructuring companies. In my opinion, the next goal is to sort of reinvent the state and not to make this only about cutting, austerity measures, etc. I believe that there are ways to reinvent the state that would save us money and improve public services. Another thing that I'm missing is conditionality. I know you're getting nervous. I'm going to wrap up here soon. Another thing that I'm missing is conditionality. I believe that in addition to the naming and shaming, we also need elements that incentivize good behavior. And I think for starters, we should use the European budget to incentivize countries to do the right thing and to recognize them that when they reach their goals, perhaps there can be financial incentives or perhaps other incentives. But there should be an element of conditionality that if I give you this money, you do something in return. I think that this is absolutely crucial going forward, especially in these times where public budgets are so strained. Also, this is my last point in this part, is there is some confusion over who will actually set these country-specific targets. And even President Barroso was rather unclear about it. And my strong recommendation is that the member states not be allowed to set the targets themselves, because obviously they're going to shoot too low so that they can reach the targets. So it's really, really important that the European Commission be in the driver's seat here, that the Commission decides what the country-specific targets should be, and also that the Commission does the surveillance. We know from experience, for instance, with the Stability and Growth Pact, which was made, quote, more flexible in 2005, was essentially made weaker, that member states tend to be soft on each other. So the Commission does have an important role to play here. Lastly, 3 key challenges that very briefly. This will be very difficult to communicate. The year 2000, we had this grandiose vision. I think everyone in Europe knows that the next couple of years are going to be really, really difficult. So this kind of strategy that is all about reform, I mean, we're going to have to prepare European citizens to some extent for hard times. And this is going to be very difficult to communicate. Huge, huge challenge because, I mean, this is ultimately what you need to foster buy-in. Secondly, key challenge is how do you overcome resistance? Because it's all nice to have these targets, but when I look at the actual flagship programs, for instance, on digital society, that's all nice and well, the digital single market, but how do I overcome the resistance from the incumbent telecoms operators if they don't like what the Commission is doing?